Welcome to the reading of ABAJAM Chronicles, books 1 and 2, as I tower above you. Whoa! Anyways, let's get this, what do you call it again, device that brings me down a notch. There we go. See now. That's a little bit better. And we'll just turn off the progress of the music. Okay, one more time. Again, welcome to ABAJAM Chronicles, readings from books 1 and 2. And this is, of course, book 1, Two Families Lost in Time. And I'm doing an experiment. I have a camera rig beside me. You can't see it at the moment. But once I finish taping, I'm going to see if I can splice it in there and make these videos a little bit more interesting. Big experiment, but I'm still going to read nonetheless, regardless of whether this works or not. So, anyways, where do we leave off? Yes, I'm using my postcard for bookmark for last week's reading, which was chapter 14. So just to bring you up to snuff, it even sounded risky to me, but considering the circumstances, just being in this other world, what with Frank upstairs in a coma, my son and his two companions off Indian scouting, and no one having any compelling answers concerning our predicament, it was a risk I was willing to take. Besides, it wasn't like I was getting drunk or had something to hide or avoid these responsibilities that were mine. Now we're going into chapter 15. I'll put the bookmark down there. Anyway, and of course, you all remember the picture from last week. Here, take a look.
Take a look at the picture from last week.
Now, this week's chapter 15 is called From Senses to Insensibility.
It's actually a very short chapter, so I'll start reading facing you. It wasn't at all difficult for me to find where the boys and I had left off from the other day, only this time it would be without their input. I remembered walking back to the Vanier's house after depositing the modules in Bill's car. It was dark, but it wasn't a stormy night outside. Inside was a completely different matter. There was a highland tempest blowing, and I needed to divert the storm if I was going to hang on to the modules. Excuse me. I regretted not letting Jackie have her way back then, but now it was too late for regrets. It was time for some serious hindsight. When I returned to the house, Jackie was doing the dishes while Bill and the boys were seated at the cleared-off dining room table. It seems the world's order, according to Bill, had been reestablished. I would have offered to help Jackie with the dishes, but that would have embarrassed Bill, and at the moment, I doubt she'd have been receptive to my offer. There was a definite cloud of tension and restraint hanging over the table, and an aura of exasperation clinging to Jackie. Look, Jackie, I apologize for imposing this dilemma on you and Bill, and disrupting the sanctity of your usually happy household. This time I was being genuinely sincere. Perhaps with me not being in such close proximity to the modules, I could now feel somewhat more sympathetic, if not empathetic. If it helps put your mind at ease, Jason and I will go see our family doctors immediately upon returning home for whatever medical tests we can contrive for them. I thought my next point was most salient in that she too could use it when requesting a blanket test for members of her family. After all, they were on well water, and well water can get contaminated, especially with Bill's garage nearby. I can easily concoct some weird internal discomfort and mimic abdominal pain, so the doctors would have to perform a complete battery of tests on me, from x-rays to blood, urine, and even stool samples. I'll take Jason along and suggest to our doctors perhaps we picked up a bug or drank some bad water up north, if that's even possible. And I say that because when I lived in Sudbury, they were known for having some of the best tasting water in North America. That's just a side note. I was trying to inject some levity into my repartee, Everyone up here knew that the drinking water in the Sudbury region was the best tasting water in all of North America. Oh, there, I'm repeating myself. I should have read that before. Anyways, then for additional reassurances, I told Jackie and Bill, did you know the Meisner family has 2 family doctors, a husband and a wife team? 2 for the government price of 1. Jackie turned her attention away from the dishes and directed her anguished gaze towards me. She appeared tired and even a little confused. She then confessed to all of us she hadn't anticipated Bill becoming so polarized against her so quickly or so easily, especially when it might concern his son's health. She felt isolated, even though she was surrounded by family and friends who now all seemed to be aligned against her.
Yeah, and in my past I've felt that the same. No matter what my reasoning or arguments were about turning over the modules to the authorities, it appears I failed to persuade any of you. She then directed her gaze to Bill and exclaimed, I'm now worried that you too might have been mysteriously affected with your handling of those objects. But perhaps Albert is right, and if we know... Oh, here's Bill talking. But perhaps Albert is right, and if no one gets sick, why give those things away to the government people? They know nothing except to cause trouble and collect the tax money. You watch what happens if news people find out. They will call Al crazy and call my Stevie a liar. We will have no peace. It is best to hide these things for now and forget about them. After some minor haranguing from the boys, Jackie, to my surprise, finally relented. She agreed to Bill's recommendation that I conceal the modules until a more appropriate time presented itself, on condition that all the medical tests for everyone came out negative and no unusual symptoms began to appear, even later on. We all decided to keep our knowledge of the modules a secret and agreed to discuss what the best course of action should be at the time, at a later date. Steve interrupted the conversation and asked, What about Sean? Shouldn't we tell him about the modules and the spaceship we saw? Jackie's response was immediate and adamant.
We are not going to show or tell Sean anything. Is that perfectly clear, young man? Why not? Bill asked rather naively. After all, Sean was his oldest son, even though he occasionally caused them both grief. Bill was still immensely proud and fond of him. He always hoped Sean might come home someday and work with him in the garage. Bill had often divulged to me his vision of Vanier and Son. Sadly, Steve never factored into his business vision. Jackie had to remind Bill how often Sean got into trouble. Not big trouble, but enough to cause concern, and that he couldn't be trusted on certain matters, especially critical matters. In all honesty, I suspect she probably didn't want to expose him to the modules. She was determined to shield both Sean and Ryan from ever contacting those things. She decided to leave it at that. It was now very late into the evening, and I still had a 5-hour drive ahead of me to Mississauga.
I indicated it was time for Jason and me to hit the road. Before leaving, we all agreed one last time that for now the modules, as well as what the boys and I had experienced firsthand, would remain our secret. We could discuss it amongst ourselves, but to no one else. I'd suggested we take some precautions in our phone conversations, as well as what we write in our letters, just in case. It did seem to me I was being unusually paranoid, but I had a feeling my caution would be vindicated sometime in the future.
Bill went to the garage and retrieved a far better, much sturdier box to rewrap the modules in. It was a small, waxed, heavy corrugated cardboard box, but some expensive, fragile tools had been shipped in. Excuse me, scratch forehead. Okay, anyways. We lined it with a plastic garbage bag and transferred the modules into the bag. We then securely sealed it with wide plastic packaging tape. The box was so firmly wrapped that it would take a sharp knife to open it up. Any tampering would be immediately apparent. We shook hands and hugged each other and cordially said our goodbyes. I tried to smooth things over with Jackie by apologizing for what had happened one more time. Both Jason and I reiterated to her our appreciation for the good dinner and their hospitality, and climbed back into the car for the ride back to the truck.
Before Bill put the car in gear, I leaned out of the passenger window and tried to console Jackie by assuring her everything would turn out all right. Trust me on this, Jackie. The Meisners never let you guys down in the past, and we won't, especially me, now in the future. I didn't realize then how prophetic that remark would become. I let Jason carry the package on his lap. Only when we got back to the truck and were heading down Highway 69 did I realize I hadn't had the opportunity to tell Jackie everything about Bernie, Andrea, or Allison. We only touched upon that matter lightly when she began to make dinner. Those damn modules had occupied my mind the whole evening again. I was most diligent in avoiding telling Bernie anything about the crash of the spacecraft, my encounter with an alien, or my close brush with death. I said nothing of the modules or the possible contamination of Stevie, Jason, or myself. I realized I may have come out of my encounter unscathed, but I did not come out untouched. For now, even our visit with the Vaniers was veiled in half-truths. Jason demonstrated an uncanny and remarkable ability to play along with me with the ruse. He was always the soft-spoken one and not easily given to lying or deception. Even Jackie knew that. This new attribute in his character was a bit disconcerting to me, and I secretly hoped it wasn't going to become chronic. With the exception, of course, in the matter of our alien encounter. I had decided it would be more prudent if I was the first to have the complete medical examination. I could make an appointment for Jason while I was there. I'll just tell our doctor and that Jason, his friend, and I seemed to feel ill for a few days while up north. The friend was seeing their family doctor in Sudbury. We would contact each other if anything out of the ordinary were diagnosed or discovered.
If, at the conclusion of all the medical tests, it was determined that no irregular malady existed or was developing within me, like in those two alien movies, God forbid, then I could confidently reveal the whole episode of our encounter to Bernie. The box itself was neatly tucked away in the garage on the top shelf of my workbench behind the old kerosene heater and jugs of kerosene. As far as she knows, it was an uneventful trip. We had a good time, some good fellowship, saw a few old friends, and still made it home in time for the weekend, just as I had originally planned. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of reading chapter 15. And let me see, where am I? Oh, yes, here I am. I need to put in the other music. Pause for a second.
Okay, so next week we'll be looking at Confessions from a Saint, chapter 16. Again, I hope all of you enjoyed that reading, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. Until then, have yourself a wonderful weekend, be safe, and remember, read a book. Okay. Bye.